We are about to start an occupation of this museum. We are in a protest against Adani, the sponsor of this gallery. Adani is a coal producer, environmental criminal, and
You tell me what you
producer
want.
of weapons against Palestinians in Gaza. We are about to start a weekend occupation, peaceful occupation of this museum, and we will now hear from Chris Packham, who is joining us today. Chris, up to you.
I think we better go up here. This is the Science Museum. And for me, science is the art of understanding truth and beauty. The truth is that the sponsors of this exhibition, Adani, are the single largest private developer of coal in the world. The truth is that science has given us the knowledge to know that if we are to survive on a sustainable planet, we need to keep that coal and all of the other fossil fuels in the ground. Adani has been alleged to have been involved in fraud, corruption, and human rights violations. Its association with coal, fraud, corruption, and human rights violation was known to the Science Museum when they first did their due diligence. And what they've done here is sanctioned Adani as a company by sidestepping to their renewable energy division. This is not something that has been revealed by we protesters, but has been known to the board of the Science Museum from the outset in 2021. And on that account, no less than 2 of their trustees have resigned, and one of their former directors has left his advisory role. I first came here as a child to the Science Museum. I see it as a bastion of the joy of human imagination, creativity, ingenuity. The last thing we need here for future generations of young people is greenwashing of this order. It's something we must push back against forthrightly because we're running out of time. Our mission here is to peacefully communicate our complete disgruntlement and abhorrence of the idea that this institution in 2024 would sanction the sponsorship of an exhibit like this to a fossil fuel driving company, a company which is burning our planet alive. And on that account, some of us will occupy this building for the foreseeable future, a couple of days. Communication is necessary. So we are going to build a pile of coal, and we're going to ask all of the visitors to this gallery to contribute to that pile by telling the Science Museum what they think about this sponsorship and this attitude in 2024. It's peaceful, it's creative, it's imaginative, and it's something that we must do at this point. The idea that young people would come here to learn about science, sponsored by such a company, revolts me and revolts most of you. We have to take action, and this is our action today. Thank you very much.
My name is Jeff Fogger. I'm a scientist. I'm an ecologist, and I am a member of Scientists for Extinction Rebellion. And I'm here today really in the context of an organization that we belong to, a coalition called Fossil Free Science Museum, which has been seeking for some years now to encourage the Science Museum to end sponsorship by fossil fuel industries. We undertook first to, as a coalition, to understand the origins and the nature of this arrangement. That meant looking at the due diligence that was done on bringing Adani in as a sponsor, It also involved looking at the criteria that the Science Museum trustees were using to select sponsors. And we discovered that both the due diligence and the justification for sponsorship from Adani had very serious flaws. So we brought this to the trustees of the museum. We wrote to them collectively. We engaged some of them individually, and sought to ask the question: how did this happen? Why were these issues overlooked? It is not, as the director of the Science Museum claims, an exhibit about the greatest challenge that faces us in the future of climate change. It's not really about climate change, and that's a great disappointment. There's very little there, just a couple short videos that explain the science underpinning how we understand how climate change is happening, and the causes of climate change, and the urgency with which we need to address it. This exhibit is basically about a few energy technologies. It avoids a discussion of fossil fuels. It focuses on wind power, solar power, nuclear power. Although the exhibits were competent in a lot of what they said, all that for me really sapped the sense of urgency that we face in climate change. This is an exhibit that sort of tells you, and I'm thinking particularly of a young scientist coming in, thinking about a career in science. It sort of says, don't worry, we've got this in hand. We've got the technology. It's not really that big a problem. It's underway.
Hello, my name's Louisa and I'm hosting you for this live stream of the occupation of the Science Museum in London by the Fossil Free Science Museum Coalition. This is a number of groups, activists and campaigners and lovers of the Science Museum, to be honest, working together in order to protest the fact that this new energy gallery called Energy Revolution has been sponsored by one of the world's largest coal conglomerates and fossil fuel conglomerates, which is Adani. So Adani is in fact the world's largest private developer of coal-fired power stations. It has interests in India, it has interests in Indonesia, and it runs the Carmichael coal mine, which is one of the largest coal mines that has been founded lately in Australia. In 2021, in fact, it started producing coal. And there are so many different concerns about Adani's environmental record, its human rights record, and it's working with Indigenous peoples. It's been lambasted for the way that it's been treating people across those countries as well. So we are here to say this is not a suitable sponsor for the Science Museum in any of its exhibitions, let alone one that's supposed to be dealing with the future of energy. So officially it's Adani Green Energy that's funding this gallery, but we're going to talk to lots of people here who have evidence to say that actually they're all part of the same family, and there's lots of very questionable practices that have gone on with the Science Museum actually coming to terms with how it's going to fund this exhibition. And we will, like I said, talk to scientists and activists who've been working on this for many years. This isn't just a one-off thing, it's a sustained campaign against the Science Museum fossil fuel sponsorship, and particularly against Adani. This is just turn around so we can see. This is going to be an occupation that the supporters hope is going to last for the whole weekend. In fact, we're here on a Friday night. We've had several announcements that have said that the Science Museum has now closed its doors, but we've stayed here on the top floor of the mezzanine, which has this new exhibition with lots of very interesting gadgets and pieces of history from the Science Museum's collections. And the idea is to provide a peaceful protest, to say that we will not tolerate this climate-wrecking businessman who's a billionaire with a huge carbon footprint from being greenwashed by his partnership with the Science Museum. So I'm now going to talk to some of the people who are here on this occupation, and just to get a bit of a frame of what's going on here, there is a huge pile of coal being built by our activists. Now, the idea being that in the morning when we have visitors come back into this gallery, we weren't preventing them from visiting just a little earlier. The idea is that this will be an installation of sorts, an engagement with the public in order to make them aware of the sponsorship that's going on at the museum, and to invite them to leave their own ideas, thoughts and judgments on cards, so form a sort of display, and then we leave them for the Science Museum to consider whether it has actually made the right judgment as to their sponsors, and whether this really is for public benefit for this new exhibition. Now, I've got somebody who I'd like to talk to first, who's been involved with the Science Museum's the campaigns against the Science Museum for quite some time. I'm going to talk to Dr. Aaron Thierry. Hi Aaron, how are you?
I'm all right, thank you.
I'm just going to pass you a microphone so that we can hear you well. Do you mind just putting that on your lapel?
Okay.
Aaron, we've actually met here quite a few times in the past, I think.
Fortunately, that's true.
Yeah. And why are we here again? Can you just explain to viewers?
Well, we're here this time because, unbelievably, the Science Museum have opened another gallery that's sponsored by a fossil fuel company. The first time that I think we came here was because Shell was sponsoring a new exhibit.
Yep.
This time it's Adani, which are the world's largest private producer of coal. And so, we're saying, not only was it bad enough that they've got galleries sponsored by oil companies, they're now partnering with a coal company as well. And it's just nuts because this is actually a gallery about energy and climate change. And so the worst sponsor you could think to have for a gallery like this is one that is heavily invested in expanding coal production. And it's basically, we're back here again to say this just can't carry on, right? We need to stop these sponsorship deals going ahead. The museum has to cancel these connections with fossil fuel industry and find partnerships that are not with companies that are polluting the planet and destroying our future. The future of the young people who are coming to this museum, right, to learn about all of this stuff. And it's not just that this company as well is incredibly polluting in terms of its business. It's also famous for carrying out human rights abuses. So this is a company that's has been found also to have committed fraud in its business practices, or very likely that it has.
This is like a rat's nest, isn't it, of the climate justice. It really shows how climate justice has all these different elements coming together, and it's not just about emissions. It's something I wanted to ask you about, actually, because there was an article, I think it was in The Guardian, this exhibition has just opened, and I'm afraid I can't remember the name of the scientist who was quoted as saying, well, it's okay because Adani Green, they're leading the way in renewable energy, so we should kind of give them a bit of slack. Is that how people here and yourself consider that?
Yeah, this is the line that the museum's been running themselves, which is, that what they've partnered here with is an arm of Adani, right? It's part of the business, which is its renewable arm, and so that's what they're saying is, but it's a workaround, right? Because actually it's all part of the same thing, and actually we know as well that Adani have basically financed coal mine expansion through borrowing against its renewable arm, right? They're not separate at all, they're completely entangled. And so for the museum and its defenders to say, well, hang on, this is completely different, this is separate, this is the good Adani, it's nonsense, it's all part of the same thing. They had the head of the whole business empire himself come and present at the opening, and he's getting all the kudos for that, as himself and his business, looking like he's being responsible, and he's not, right? His whole business is based on, ignoring all the scientific warnings that are saying we have to leave the coal in the ground. The overwhelming majority of the coal in the ground, according to the climate science, which apparently this museum says we should pay attention to, and yet ignores itself. That's the paradox. that's forced us to come here today as scientists and as young people and others who are concerned about what this museum's doing. Ultimately, this is a public institution. It's our museum as much as anything, and we believe in the idea of educating about science and what that stands for, but not at the same time as greenwashing these companies, right? It's a perversion of that good intention.
It's extremely problematic, and you're right. A public body is here for public benefit. Is this in the public's interest to give them a false picture of what's being perpetuated around the world by this conglomerate?
Exactly. Ultimately, it's blood money, right? And so I think the museum should be better than that. We should stand for the facts of the science and for a better world, a better human world, which means a world without human rights abuses, right? So there are partners that you could look to that haven't got that track record. And just to make it even worse right now, we also know that Adani is another arm of Adani is in arms manufacturing, and they're currently selling weapons to Israel, which are being used to bomb Gaza. So, every way you look at it, this is the worst possible partnership that you could imagine. And what's particularly, I think, telling is the way that the museum has reacted to any challenges about this. They've just completely blanked anybody from being able to raise these issues. And so even when their own trustees resigned from the board in protest, and their own, former director resigned from the advisory board in protest at this going ahead, it's as though there's no response to that. They just carry on regardless. And so I think there's something really troubling now, obviously, at the top of the management of this museum, that they are just completely impervious to kind of logical argument and ethical responsibilities that are being asked of them. And I think we really need to start asking questions about what is going on at the management level of this institution.
What's their ulterior motive?
Exactly. Why are they continuing with partnerships like this when they're ruining the reputation of an institution like this? I mean, we're going to keep protesting until they stop. We're not going to give up. So ultimately, it's just a matter of time. But what we're saying is well, why drag this out? You could be. They could be on the right side of history here, and they're refusing to do the right thing. Whereas other museums have gone and cut ties with fossil fuel industries. In the UK, pretty much every single other major cultural institution in this country has cut ties with all fossil fuel sponsors over the last few years, right? So why is it that the museum that supposedly represents science and reason is the last one to do that? And so I think we do see other science museums as well in other countries that have cut ties with fossil fuel companies. In Holland, for example, the Science Museum in Amsterdam have cut ties with Shell. We could see that happening here in London. I really hope we do see it very soon, but we're going to carry on coming back and doing these kind of protests until we see that change.
Aaron Turi, thank you very much. Here all weekend.
Here all weekend, yeah, 2 nights.
We might see you again. Thank you very much.
Bye.
We're moving on now. I was really interested by what Aaron Turi said about blood money. So you're very dark. There we go. So we've got a representative here from our South Asian community and activists. Would you like to introduce yourself and talk a bit about that side of the story, the human rights abuses that Adani is perpetuating?
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Latika Singha, and I'm from International Solidarity for Academic Freedom in India. And I'd like to...
Sorry, let's get your microphone.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's pop you on there. Okay.
Yeah, so you were talking about blood mining, and I'd actually like to start with what the gentleman before me was talking about, that there is a genocide happening in Gaza right now in which Adani is very much implicated. And I've been looking at the exhibits around here, and if you look at that exhibit there's a stamp from the 1950s from the United States of America saying atoms for peace. And to have something like that at this time when United States is also very much implicated in what's happening in Gaza, but also if you look at the stamp again and the language on it, it is very colonial. It talks about an inventiveness of man, which is only very much a Western imperial as if nobody else knows anything about invention. And for somebody like Adani coming from a country which was colonized and showcasing this, but not showcasing what were the energy revolutions happening prior to what was the colonial period, is just missing from here. I couldn't see that at all. We're talking of mathematical models, but when we look, the world has survived billions of years with human civilization on it, because the people, the generations long before us, lived in sustainable ways. They thought through things. It's not that they were not using things. It's not that they might not have mind. After all, we know that copper vessels go back thousands of years. But why is it of concern now? It's of concern now because of what we've done in the past 200, 300 years alongside the colonialism and imperialism of the world. And the extractive capitalism that it needs to keep going. So I also think that coming from a country which was colonized, and to actually be uplifting all that in the energy revolution looks really it's greenwashing more than a green revolution.
What do you think his motives are for that? Is it quite obvious from the kind of campaign material that we've seen about the gallery opening, and what's your take?
Well, yes, it's more about personal, trying to, obviously trying to make a space for yourself, maybe in a kind of history which you think is going to be the right history, and not considering how you're leaving behind everybody else in it. So it's very much, to me, kind of the top 1% doing things just for themselves as part of that.
So thinking about the Indian context, because I know obviously you're following this very closely, there's lots of things going on in India to do with Adani that are really problematic and scary for certain communities. Would you be able to expand a bit on that for viewers who aren't familiar?
Yeah, so the areas where Adani is doing his mining, but also where he's setting up his solar farms, of which also we have an example here in the exhibition. There is no sort of mention of who were the people who were displaced from the lands, who were the people who actually were not consulted and should have been consulted to ask if they wanted these things happening on their lands, whose forests are being cut. So these are the indigenous peoples of India, the Adivasis in central and eastern India especially. And in fact, tomorrow, as our occupation here continues, there's another protest in India, year-long protest, which has been going on near one of his thermal plants, where also they're going to have a big gathering at the moment to protest more and more, because what is happening is that the Adani is working very closely with the government of India, getting full support from the institutions, especially the security, and there is tremendous repression also in these areas. There are arrests being made, false charges being put on people, and the idea is to generally create that fear in people so that they don't come out and protest. Leaders are being picked up in the middle of the night, early in the morning, security forces just coming to their houses, just picking them up, putting them behind bars on charges of sedition, whereas all that they've been doing is peacefully protesting.
So the implication being this is a concerted effort between Modi's government and Adani to silence that dissent.
Absolutely.
So they can go ahead with mining.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
It's a really interesting point, because we come here for the weekend, and we don't know how the museum and maybe the police are going to react, but this is coming here and spending a weekend here in occupation is nothing like what the Adivasis in India are facing when they're actually looking at their lives, their livelihood, their land, all being taken away.
Absolutely. In fact, last time we did the action here, after that we heard that in the Hasdeo forest, which is one of the most eco-sensitive, beautiful areas in central India and home to many Adivasis who've lived there, again, as I said, in sustainable ways, those forests are being cut down for some of the coal mines that Adani has got in India. And a protest site there was burned down. It was just burned down in a couple of days after we had done our action here. It was really, but the people are amazing. The resistance, I have to say, is amazing. The word doesn't get out so much because the Indian media is bought out and it will not tell you. But these resistance movements are very historical. They are, these people, the Adivasis who who are doing these movements, they are extremely impoverished. There's no money supporting all this, and to be able to continue resisting just because you can see that they know that they are the people who are saving the forests for the rest of the world, so that we can live and enjoy our lives. So, and their courage is just tremendous. It is just inspirational, and I can only say thank you to them.
It's an amazing, because Adani has tentacles going around the world, it's an amazing way of connecting different campaigns. I wonder, do they know about what we're doing?
Yes, they do know about what you're doing. There has been information going back. Yes, definitely. Mm-hmm.
And we definitely know what they're doing, and we're thanking them for it as well. Because like you said, they are acting on our behalf on these front lines.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you giving your perspective. And if I just take your microphone again from you. Thank you. We'll see you later. Let's explore the rest of the occupation now for our viewers. So the coal pile has grown. I'm not sure whether that's it finished, but all of this had to be brought into the museum in backpacks and various ingenious ways, so that it was able to come in and not be confiscated. But like I said before, absolutely no ill will intended to either the museum's collections or its staff. This is a peaceful protest, and it's all about raising awareness and really putting a bit of pressure on the museum management. As Dr. Thierry was saying so eloquently, this is really a campaign from the top. Sir Ian Blatchford, who's the director of the Science Museum, he, as a result of the due diligence report that has been exposed as not being followed, the trustees now have to sign off any further sponsorship deals. He can't just single-handedly do so. So there have been some successes from this campaign, as well as the resignation of ex-director Professor Chris Rapley, who used to be, he was on the advisory board, and he used to be a director, and then 2 other trustees as well. So bit by bit we're chipping away. I'm going to see if there's any other scientists who would, or any other members of the protest who would like to have a chat. Oh, I see a hand coming up. Hello. Oh, I think we're just being asked to stand in a circle, but let's see if we can have a quick word. May I put that, or you put that on your lapel? That's a microphone?
Yep.
Hello, so another scientist. Would you like to introduce yourself and say why are we doing this today? Why are you doing this? What really riles you up about Adani sponsorship?
So, I'm Dr. Sophie Renner. I'm a particle physicist, and I know firsthand about the influence that the Science Museum has, because I grew up in London, and coming to the Science Museum is one of the main reasons why I am a physicist.
Right.
It really sparks children's imaginations, and I think it can be a huge force for good in that sense. So it makes me very angry that they're using that influence to greenwash this terrible coal company, which is clearly trying to give the impression that it's going to be part of, the future of energy, but year on year it's just increasing its coal production, and it clearly has no intention of changing its ways. That makes me really sad, that's why I'm here today, to show them that the scientific community is not on their side with this one.
Yeah. And I suppose museums, like scientists, are supposed to be showing a balanced view. They're supposed to take the evidence and then, engage the public with a narrative that makes sense.
Yeah.
And is this a balanced way of going about it by having a sponsor like this?
No, because you can't tell the truth when your sponsor decides what goes in the exhibit and how it's portraying them as an industry. It's not scientific at all, and it's very misleading. And this is the time when we really need to be educating the public properly and showing like what actually the future will look like and what solutions are needed. And this is just an incredible perversion of that.
We should say that there was a gagging clause in the original Adani agreement with the Science Museum that was then taken away after a Channel 4 investigation. However, it required that investigation and concerted efforts from campaigns like this to actually make them look at their contracts and say, are we maybe is this maybe not a good look for our museum in terms of its objectivity?
Exactly, and clearly Adani are very happy with the way that the sponsorship is going, and that is already telling you that that it's not. It's not telling the truth about Adani and companies like it.
Not an equal partnership, perhaps.
No. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our protesters are now having another photo opportunity with their coal pile. This is the scientists in particular. So Scientists for XR have been a really key influence in this ongoing coalition campaign against the Science Museum. And generally they will say, we love the Science Museum. It's the sponsorship of these galleries that is a real ethical problem. So we're here to try and influence this public body for the better. And because I know that we are a coalition, and we've
really proud
spoken
of
to two scientists already, and we've spoken to somebody from the Indian academic freedom movement. I think what we're going to do, I've just seen a friend of mine, and actually we're going to give a museum perspective now. So I'm going to do a little bit of a double act with Pete. Hello, Pete.
Hello. Now, you've got a bit of experience working in museums.
I do, yes.
What experience have you got?
So I've worked, just in case people have just joined the live stream, oh, thank you. I'll put that on you, or just hold that, Pete. Sorry. So if anybody's just joined the live stream, I was doing the live stream. I'm also here because I have experience I work in museums myself. I've been working in museums for 7 years as an education professional. So this gallery is just about to open up for school visits in the next week. That's the bread and butter of my job. And I really believe passionately that museums have a role to play in providing that space where people from all walks of life, especially the younger generations, come and actually really grapple with difficult ideas, including climate change. It's the leading cause of our time that we need museums for, as well as things like decolonisation, which all come together in this issue with Adani. So I'm very passionate that this sponsorship deal is not in the public interest at all, and that's what museums are here for. Museums Association says in its code of ethics that we should be acting in the public benefit at all times, and I believe that is actually being. There's a risk here, that there's a real reputational risk to the Science Museum that they're not acting in the public benefit.
Is there anything in the museum specifically that you've seen that, if a school visit were to come here, you would be thinking, that's not right, that shouldn't be there?
I don't want to criticise the curators of the museum, because I think from their perspective they have a collection, they have a big collection in their vaults, and they want to make the best use of that to tell a story. It might not be the story that we particularly expect, but I don't want to really put the blame on them for anything. I haven't actually seen the whole exhibition. I wouldn't be able to make that judgment as yet. They've got like the first electric cab from the, I think it's it's actually the 1890s, and that is amazing. However, I would expect to see a little bit more in this exhibition about the actual science of climate change, which is, making people understand what's really going on in the atmosphere, in the oceans, in the forest, what are the drivers, and why we need that energy revolution that they're talking about. It's quite gadgety, bells and whistles, and I'd like to see what the Science Museum does in terms of engaging young people with school workshops to perhaps mellow that out.
What would you like to see the museum talk about in terms of time scale? Because there's not really much about anything about how quickly things need to change?
There's not, and there's things about how the climate might change in the future. We know it is going to change quite rapidly. I think that it's not an exhibition that quite has that sort of urgency about it, and I think that is something that it was a new gallery, it's a permanent gallery, that could have been more of a focus, because we do need to act now, and I think children in particular and the young people need to understand that everybody has a part to play. And I should say that would start with the Science Museum having their own part to play and not having a sponsor that is wrecking the planet, Indigenous people's rights, helping to bomb Gaza. It really strikes the totally wrong tone in terms of what we're trying to do with the museum, which is to open up people's minds to think about difficult issues in a way, not to cause harm. I think that's what we're all here for. Scientists, museum professionals, we don't want to cause harm. We want to be able to make things better, and this doesn't really help.
If you were to have one minute meeting with Ian Blatchford in his office right now,
oh bloody hell!
what kind of things would you be saying? What would you want him to know?
I think I'd want him to know that museum professionals are not behind him, actually. He seems to be very out of step. I don't know about people at his own museum, but certainly climate change is a big issue in the museum sector at the moment, and it's difficult. A lot of people don't really know how to use their collections to make these conversations happen. But I think it would be a reality check, taking him some data about, how the museum sector feels about this and how the public feels about it and how we should be reflecting that in our exhibitions.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pete.
I'll give you this as well.
Yes, I keep forgetting my microphones. Fantastic. Okay, so I believe that people have been given an opportunity to leave by the museum staff, and they're saying that the people need to leave now. So some people are departing. We are going to talk to, I'm continuing the live stream, so I'm going to have to stay, I think. Would you like to have a word?
Sure.
A quick word. Were you hoping to leave?
I do. Sure, let's try.
Let's have a go. Okay, we can do it with the mask. If you hold that just below your mouth. So
I can take the mask off. Oof. So I pin it here.
Okay.
Is that going to work?
That will be fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to introduce yourself and talk a bit about why is Adani making you mad?
My name is Deborah. I'm a specialist of statistics and data science, and I believe that Adani and their sponsorship money has no place in the Science Museum, particularly in a gallery that's supposed to promote clean energy and renewable energies. And I'm here today to protest this.
Is there anything from your scientific background in data that's made you have a special perspective about this?
Absolutely, yeah. Evidence behind the generation of greenhouse gases attributable to industrial activities, and particularly the extraction of fossil fuels, it's very, very clear. It's a major driver of all greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. It's increased in the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, even though we already know from data and evidence that it's a terrible thing to do. And more the evidence is showing that we are heading towards a very dangerous point in terms of climate and environmental breakdown. The Science Museum is the place where we should be talking about this kind of facts, talking about the real science behind it, and not giving a platform to a coal mining industrial.
Should they be doing more in general, do you think, about making climate change, making the urgency of climate change, I should say, apparent to the public?
Absolutely, I believe so. I understand that it can be a difficult topic, and unfortunately, it's a bit unfair. It's sometimes portrayed as a politically sensitive topic, but I don't see it that way. I see that as facts, and particularly facts that are going to impact all of us in the very near future unless we act right now.
I think that's a really important point. Like, why is it seen as such a political thing to not have to mention? Or because getting a sponsorship deal like this is definitely very political. So
it really is, and it really feels that way. And it's very frustrating from a scientific perspective to see how political this kind of discourse has become. I think it's reflective of a general breakdown of a political and economical system that we're living in. The power of corporate money, and particularly the power of energy money in politics today, is quite palpable. And I think particularly in situations where we're going up against this conventional discourse, we feel it more than ever.
Yes, it feels like the last couple of years have been harder than ever, actually, to make the. It's been like a doubling down, hasn't it, on all fronts, like government, police.
It's been strongly confounded by a wave of disinformation, which itself is a tool of political oppression in some sense, isn't it? You can distract from important, urgent conversations, notably conversations around energy use and climate change, by drowning it in a flow of disinformation and politically motivated disinformation. I see the sponsorship of Adani for this exhibition here as no different in some sense.
I would agree with that. It's a way of gilding the truth, I suppose, isn't it? Or some people, yes, whatever you want to call it, greenwashing. So, yeah.
Yeah, greenwashing is a form of misinformation.
Yes.
And I want to be here today to protest against it alongside the other wonderful scientists who've decided to come down for the occasion.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Good to have your perspective. Everybody we've talked to has had different perspectives, which is a really nice way. It's being in a coalition like this.
Yes.
You get a lot of different, years of experience coming at all different angles. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Speaking of that, I am going to. So we've talked to a good variety of people now going around the gallery, and I should mention that because we don't have anybody here from an Indigenous Australian Aboriginal perspective. So the first that I ever heard about Adani was when they were blowing up a cultural monument of the Wangan people in Australia, and I believe that was 2021. Things of that was, I thought, this is, well, as you heard, I work in heritage and museums, so this was something that I thought, this is beyond the pale. How can they do that? And then, the whole can of worms opened from there. And Australia is an area where Adani has significant interests and is mining extensively on Indigenous territories, in some cases with permission, but there's been reports that that Aboriginal people have felt like they were manipulated in order to give consent for these projects. And Ian Blatchford, who is the director of the Science Museum, he had a very strident interview on Radio 4 a few years ago, where he was defending Adani and saying that we shouldn't be listening to these Indigenous activists because they can well, I'm not sure he said make things up, but they can make it sound a lot worse than it is, and we need to be sensible about this. And that did not sit right at all with me or with those communities who were extremely angry about that very public show of support for Adani as a company, not even as a sponsor of the Science Museum, but as a company from this public body of the UK. So I just wanted to give that perspective, because I don't think that we have anybody here who will have a lot to say about that. But like I said, it's just so many issues to do with climate justice and human rights coming together here, which makes it so appropriate that we are occupying the Science Museum in London. And the idea is that activists will be here until Sunday morning. They're going to interact with visitors in this gallery throughout Saturday and try and make them aware of what's behind all of the objects and information laid out here, the financial backing that's allowed it to happen. And I think on this live stream we'll also play in a video from Culture Unstained at some point, which is a campaign group against, for, I should say, ethical sponsorship, and particularly against fossil fuel sponsorship, and saying that there are restrictions and guidelines as to what museums should do to have ethical sponsorship, and those have not been followed as far as we're concerned in this case. So I'm just going to try and find whether anybody else would like to chat. I think we've got into a bit of a rhythm here where the museum is closed to the public. We are starting to bed down, and there will be an overnight stay, and for some people 2 overnight stays. We're never sure how exactly the museum will react, whether they'll call the police. That's still a possibility, but until then we are hanging out here. So let's see if we can talk to any more people before we wrap up the stream. Hello there.
Hello.
I'm doing a live stream at the moment. Would you like to say anything about why you're here, either of you?
Yeah, can do. Yeah.
Okay, why don't we go into a place where I have a little bit more light, if that's okay. This way.
Do you want us together?
If you'd like.
Yeah?
Yeah, I can do a double act. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So if you could hold that in that case and just share it between you. Okay. So, it's still a little bit dark. Let's move this way a little bit. Very poor lighting here for our video. Great, okay. So we've spoken to people who were scientists today, we've spoken to the youth and some people from India who were talking about academic freedom and human rights abuses. I'm wondering what perspective you bring here about why do you think Adani should not be a sponsor of the Science Museum?
Well, I mean, I think mine is maybe as a parent. So I'm involved with XR Families. We've been coming many times to this museum to talk about greenwashing and, like the impact of the sponsorship, on really the integrity of this museum, where we take our children to, we take our children here to learn about science, but without ethics, or integrity, science can be really harmful, like technological developments. And we can see with Adani, for example, the use of drones. With the partnership with the Albit system, the use of drones to kill Palestinian children at the moment. So I think for us, it's just, again, pushing this museum to stop taking the money from this fossil fuel, for this massive coal company, and also involved with human rights abuse. And it's not only this gallery, because obviously this one is the new gallery, but there's Equinor as well that sponsors some of the children activity.
That's true, the Wonder Lab.
The Wonder Lab, which is wonderful, but again, being associated to the company that is extracting oil, and at the moment being linked to Rosebank oil field, that we know is a massive betrayal of our kids. So that's my reason.
Would you bring your children here? At the moment,
I've brought my daughters for protest. So she's been here a few times because we've protested here a few times, but otherwise, no, it's not a place where I would, want to take my friends. I wouldn't want them to take their children here, because I just think, again, we teach kids about honesty, and not lying, and if they come here and this exhibition, there's lots of interesting things here, but knowing that the museum is taking money from people who are actually making the situation worse and destroying those kids' futures, it's just I think it's just disgusting.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's very difficult when we want to think about truth-telling in museums. There's so many issues with doing that, but one thing you can do in particular is to not to have dirty money behind your exhibitions. So, thank you. And yourself?
Yeah, well, actually, I've had a sleepover at this museum before. It was probably about 20 years ago down in the lunar landing space
20
gallery.
years ago, okay.
Yeah, when my children were little back then. Little would I've known that today I would have been here having another sleepover without the kids who are now up here somewhere. So I was actually quite shocked because although I had read about Adani and when I knew I was coming to this protest, to this action, and just to see the blatant hypocrisy written on the walls, about just transitioning, and you just think, how can this be happening? How can a company be so blatantly hypocritical and offer this space all about transitioning to a new revolution in energy when they're actually extracting all of this dirty coal in really harmful ways, and their human rights abuses. So not only the carbon that will be produced from the coal that Adani is extracting, but also the fashion in which Adani is extracting the coal and the effect that's having on people, local communities and all the rest.
So a just or fair transition away from fossil fuels for whom? What do they mean by that exactly?
Exactly. It just, none of it makes any sense, especially in a place like this, which is a place where people have great faith in this museum. I think it's greatly revered in London and in the world, and yet, how can we allow this to happen? That we're offering this to our children and to for the future of our generations, and yet it's completely sullied by the sponsors, by Adani, who is doing the exact opposite. So
my feeling is that it's a very consumer-focused exhibition saying, just keep doing what you're doing, it's going to be okay, technology will solve this. Is that what we need?
No. I mean, technology isn't going to get us out. We need to stop, we need to stop the dirty fossil fuels and not kind of create fancy exhibits that just distract us from the real work. And obviously there's also the Palestine armament issue, which is just absolutely horrendous. When we've had every Sunday, every day, people are up in arms saying this can't be happening, this is genocide, and yet this museum is taking money from a corporation that is actually producing the weapons that are causing the genocide. And I think if people knew that, I'm looking forward to telling people that are coming to the gallery tomorrow. I think there'll be a lot of people who will be really shocked and will be thinking about that, and I'm hoping that they will put comments to the museum to say that we won't have this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I think, being in the Science Museum, I'm not massively surprised to see that this would include quite a lot of, technological solutions, like some of them which, already exist and we know are going to play a massive part. So, like talks about insulating building, this is something that we've seen in recent campaign, is critical. So I think on the content, I've not seen everything, but I don't think that it's not relevant. Again, there's not that critical thinking on like the values that go behind it as well. It doesn't talk about obviously like economic system and consumerism, in general.
No.
But for example, at some point it talks about renewable and how minerals, like rare minerals, are going to be more and more needed and critical. But does it talk there about like potential human rights abuse and extractivism and like the countries who are currently like being destroyed, for the sake of producing those batteries for the EV cars that countries in the West want to have. So yes, I think it's good to put those things in context beyond the technology itself.
There's huge ethical conundrums, aren't there, that science actually can't answer, but science is a part of what we're weighing up here, and it would be nice to think that was part of the exhibition as well. And the kind of the values behind that as well, rather than just saying here are some objects that are going to help us out of this. Obviously, museums are about objects, but they should be about ideas as well.
And we see museums doing it, like having been to the Wildlife Photographer of the Year exhibition at the Natural History Museum, like every year. Like I've seen like the content developing every year as well, like how much they talk about climate change and the impact on nature and biodiversity. So they don't only show like the pretty pictures. They explain as well like what is happening to those ecosystems. So they bring that content to people about the natural world, but they also explain how the natural world is like being destroyed at the moment. So this is something that this museum could be doing. So talk about the science, but also talk about the values and ethics that need to go alongside the science, and also like questioning, where
that shouldn't be a threat to science. It should be helping it, helping it to help us with it. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to show people a bit more about just what's going on now, and then we're going to wrap up. It's all very calm after us producing our coal piles. So that's just about us wrapping up here for the live stream at the Science Museum. It's going to be a long 24 hours plus ahead. Protesters are going to be here, they hope, for Saturday evening. Saturday through the day, engaging with visitors, Saturday evening, and then leaving on Sunday morning. The whole idea is not to disrupt the business of the museum at all, but it's to get the message out there about Adani's sponsorship and to really make visitors aware of what they're coming to see. So we want everybody's opinions about this, because really this is a public body and the Science Museum should be following the opinions and the public mood of their clients. So please share the live stream, use it as a tool to help others understand the issues. And if you're interested, maybe you want to come along and have a chat with us. We are on the second floor mezzanine in the Energy Revolution Gallery, and we'll be here till Sunday morning. Thanks for watching, everyone.
I'm very happy to be here today on this momentous day for the inaugurations of the Energy Revolution Gallery at the Science Museum. I've always believed that our lives are part of a bigger story. It is our duty to take care of our planet, not only for these generations and the next, but also for the generations to come. This new gallery is about more than just a clean air or about moving away from oil and gas. This gallery is special because it makes us think, dream, and wish for change. It shows us how our world, our economy, and our own lives can change for the better.
We're outside the VIP opening for the Energy Revolution Gallery at the Science Museum. We've just been talking to the invited guests in the queue, which included journalists, contributors to the gallery, trustees, and highlighting to them that far from being some progressive, climate-friendly company, Adani is the world's biggest private producer of coal. So it's Adani Green Energy, the renewables brand, sponsoring this new gallery. But the reality is it's not separate from the rest of the Adani group, which is involved in coal mines, coal power, weapons. So right now, Adani is forcing through these coal investments on the lands of Indigenous peoples in India and Australia, who have been resisting for years and years and years before this gallery was even a thing. We have some flyers just with some information, and everyone in the queue was open to having a conversation, learning the reality about Adani. but security were very heavy-handed for a time, pushing us out of the way and really wanting to shut down the conversation about the sponsor. I mean, if the museum is so determined that being sponsored by Adani is the right thing, which it's not, it should at least be accountable, open, and invite the debate and the scrutiny. The museum hasn't even announced that this gallery is opening, and it opens next week. So there's been this desire to try and dodge controversy, avoid embarrassment, because they know that Adani is toxic, it is a human rights violating company, it is mired in controversy of corruption. They shouldn't have touched them with a barge pole. And this sponsorship deal will end sooner or later. Adani is also partnering with the Israeli weapons company Elbit Systems. And Elbit produces drones and other weapons currently being used on the Palestinian people in Gaza right now. And so by working with them, Adani is profiting from that genocide of Palestinian people happening right now. And so yes, it's about coal, yes, it's about climate, but it's also about justice. We need to stand with the Palestinian people and call out those companies that are profiting from that genocide.